Good evening, everybody. I'm like fiddling with my mic and drinking water and thinking, I wonder how much of the 45 minutes I can just spend sort of faffing with things. That'll get me through. So since I last sat here a couple of weeks ago, and I think I mentioned then that I was rather hoping to discover the secret to not feeling nervous before coming up here, and just to give you an update, still haven't figured it out, but working on it, and you'll be the first to know if I do. But thank you all. Really thank you to the whole community for the support and the encouragement that I feel like I've received, and that you give to one another in this space. Thank you to Paul for inviting me to be here, and for your support. Mm-hmm. So something I've been doing in the run-up to this practice period and during the practice period is making contact with other people who've been Shusos before, who've been in this role of Shuso, and trying to get everything I can out of them to have some idea of what was ahead. Any advice they could give me, especially around the Dharma talks, and not just Shusos, but mentors and teachers also. And sort of one message that has come back to me pretty loud and clear, I've heard again and again, don't worry, just be yourself. Just be yourself, be yourself. And those two words to me, I don't know how it is for you, but those two words for me sort of open a gate of so many questions that follow on from that. What does that mean? On the surface of things, I can have some idea, maybe of what being myself might mean. I might come here, be aware that I'm trying to put on some airs and graces, but truly presenting as myself. And so originally when I was preparing this talk, I was kind of looking to all sorts of like teachings and the Dharma and texts, and what can I bring to support this? And it seemed that really the way to approach this that stays the truest to the advice that I've received is just to bring where I am and what I'm feeling in this moment. I think it's really helpful to share our difficulties. I think that we have a kind of an instinct about that as people. As humans, we ask each other so many times during the day, how you doing? How you doing? What's going on for you? And often we'll just, if you're me, often you'll just say, I'm fine, everything's great, I'm good. And then, so a lot of people have asked me that, like in the last few weeks, I suppose, because, we've come in new to the Zen Center, learning a lot of things, plus stepping into this role. So a lot of people have very sweetly kind of checked in with me and, how you doing? And, it's probably a lot of responsibility. And I said, it's all fine. And then one day somebody said to me, we had this exchange, and then they looked a bit disappointed. And they said, I was kind of fishing for a complaint there, actually. I was kind of hoping you might complain about something. I think the way that we share our difficulties together can be really energizing, for receiving as well, receiving from one another. if we are able to share that, to reveal something which is difficult for us. So I'll file a complaint this evening then. I'll approach the complaint. It's hard for me because my personality is a little bit like, I like to look at the bright side of things, sort of compulsively, maybe a little bit too much. And sometimes I sweep the things that are difficult under the rug a bit. So, what is the most challenging thing right now? So I get asked a lot, people say, oh, how's cleaning the toilets and how's doing the wake-up bell? And that's all fine. That really is genuinely quite enjoyable. And we just started the Shuso teas this week, and this is wonderful, really delightful. But the hard thing for me is sitting up here and speaking. This is probably the most challenging bit. I don't know if it's a full complaint exactly, but I'll share that it's difficult. I'll share that it's challenging. And it probably goes back to what I was saying about my difficulty to really understand for myself what this idea about being yourself really is. What is it to be myself? So because I'm realizing that that's kind of difficult for me to understand, then it's kind of difficult for me to get up here and talk as well. There's a feeling of not being ready that's very strong. And so that kind of plays in on confidence too. And whenever I think of confidence, I think back to somebody I knew when I was at art school. I was a student. And there was somebody who was a mature student there. He was an older person. And sort of the rest of us young people were all experimenting with different media and not quite sure what we were doing, and doing one thing one week and the next thing the next week. This person just had this whole body of work that they were already doing, and they were sort of so sure of themselves, and they were already having exhibitions, and I'm not really sure why they were even at art school, honestly. And I said to him, I said, you just seem so confident. And he had this huge smile, these lovely bright eyes, and he said, it's a trick. He said, confidence is a trick, It's a trick. You learn tricks. And I thought, maybe to some extent I could see that. That could be tricks. And so in my practice, I think what I've been trying to do is put down some of those tricks. What does it feel like to put down some of those tricks? My big challenge tonight was to show up with just this one little piece of paper, and not what I would like, which is like a whole file full of quotes and sutras and things that I could quote to sound sort of clever and meaningful. This would have been my trick. So I'm really grateful to be in this role. I'm discovering it as I go. I would wish it for everybody here, to experience every corner of practice. When this Shuso role began, for those of you who weren't here, it begins with a ceremony, the Shuso entering ceremony it's called. And for those of you who've never seen it, it's kind of like a drama. It's something that's kind of acted out, and it's scripted. And it goes something like that the Shuso is that the student is asked if they'd like to be Shuso, and they say, oh, no, absolutely not, no way, like this responsibility is too great for me. And there's a way that it's kind of physically plotted, like downstairs in the Zendo, where this student is kind of physically sort of pinned in by all the senior Dharma teachers who kind of ask again. And the Shuso says no many times, the potential Shuso, the student says no many times. And then in response, the teacher responds in an appropriate and encouraging way. So the Shuso says things like, I'm not ready yet, I don't feel ready, and this responsibility feels too great. And the teacher says, but who's something along the lines of, but who's ready? When could we ever be ready? And, please come, please join us. And then something happens when the student in this scene, in the script, just kind of flips and says, okay, okay, I'll do it. I'll try. Let me help you. Please let me help you. Let me come in and help you. And I thought, this is so curious. I mean, first of all, like acting this out because I was feeling it. I was really feeling it. Like I'm not ready. What would ready be? Let me just like read the Shobogenzo a couple more times. Yeah, just cover to cover. Maybe then I'll be ready. Or just give me another like 10 years or something. Maybe then I'll be ready. So what is it that happened? Like I'm so curious. What is it that happens when there's like a change of heart and a change of mind, and this character goes from saying, oh, no, to yes, let's try, let's go forward, let's take this step. So I've been making a little study of myself about readiness. Like I've been thinking a lot about this word and the state and how it feels to not feel ready and then to feel ready, and what does that mean? Like what do I do? What do we do? What does any of us do when we don't feel ready? I think there's all kinds of different responses. There's like evasion, like, oh, just see if I can run this one out, or maybe putting something off. Maybe I'll just put this off for a little while, and then like this time next week, I'll feel better about it, or a year from now, maybe something will change. Or it happens sometimes, and maybe you're the kind of personality who throws caution to the wind and just charges directly at the thing you're afraid of, like a warrior, swinging your axe, battle cries. This is another approach, I suppose. I know that for myself, I kind of get like a sort of a sinking feeling, like a sort of a shrinking feeling. And one of the things that I often feel that I need in order to be ready to face something is like information. Like I need to know. Like if I just like read up on this, then I'll know. I'll have more expertise. And so this was funny. This made me laugh the other day. I was looking online, and this like clickbait sort of article came up for me. Clickbait, or my daughter calls it brain rot. When something's, that's what the young people call it now, it's like brain rot. I came across some brain rot where it was quite an interesting article. I don't know if it's true, but they said that the clickbait was, the title was, here's a riddle that like 95% of Harvard graduates can't solve, but kids can, right? I bet some of you are like smiling, but you've come across the same thing. So I was like, ooh, like I wonder if this would be interesting, wonder what this could teach me. So I clicked on it, and somebody somewhere got $1, I'm sure. And it went something like this. This is why it made me laugh. So they sort of put out this riddle, and it's like impossible. It's something like, I am why polar bears are white, and I'm why women comb their hair, and I'm why grandmothers wear green on a Sunday or something. And they give all these sort of bizarre clues. And then at the end it says, and can you solve this riddle? And they're like, oh, kindergarteners all get this right, and really smart people don't know where to start. And so the answer was, no, you can't solve the riddle. Like, that was the answer, And I was like, of course, like, that's what my daughter would say, Like, that's the most, like, obvious response. It's right here. Like, it's the most honest response. And it's right here, and sometimes it feels like it's the most difficult place to get to. To be so simple in your approach, to kind of not kind of get caught up in, that this is so difficult. I have to figure it out somehow. I have to figure it out using my brain and everything I've ever learned. So I would say that being in this role for these few weeks is teaching me about readiness. I guess that's where I'm going with all of this. It's teaching me about readiness and lack of readiness, the field of readiness, whether there's lack or whether there is readiness present. What does it mean to be ready? And then I also have trained as and worked as a chaplain in a hospital. And I thought back to that process, like that process of training, and what that taught me about readiness. And it felt very similar in a way. When young, sort of fresh chaplaincy students enter a hospital, and then after a very short period of onboarding, they kind of get sent straight out onto the floors, to visit people who might be going through something very, very life-changing, life-ending, serious and very serious emotions and grief and, all sorts of things. And I remember kind of walking through the hospital corridors on my way to my first few visits, just thinking, how do I show up for this? I haven't read enough books. Like, I need, wait, before this starts, let me just go get my certificate in grief counseling, and, let me just go and do this, and let me go and do that. But there was something about the support we received and the confidence that our teachers, our educators put into us, gave to us, that really sort of allowed us to feel that there wasn't necessarily anything that we needed to know, before we went in. They would say, you already have what you need. You already have everything. You already have everything. And then I'd be like, really? Then why do we train? Why do we spend years doing this? Why do chaplains spend years and years training and specializing and certifying? Why do Zen students, if we're already perfect, spend so many years, all our lives, in this sincere practice? So during my time at the hospital, I remember one of the encounters that really stands out to me was I was working as an on-call chaplain that day, and I was called to the emergency room to talk to a woman. I'd been told that her husband had passed away. They were an older couple, and he died very suddenly from a stroke. And I'd also been told that the woman did not yet know that her husband had died, because in the hospital, the way it works is that the attending doctor has to be the person to break the news. But they also said, but this woman's all on her own, and she needs someone to sit with her, so can you go and sit with her? So I was walking into this space, knowing this huge deal that this woman didn't know. And this, it was, you can imagine, difficult. But then she started to catch on, and she felt that something was wrong, and she felt something had happened. And she, we ended up, getting to the truth of the situation. And her grief was very strong, very sudden, very sharp. And I had this feeling of, just uselessness. What can I do? What can I say? What could anybody say in this moment? I felt it so strongly, I began to take it personally. I was actually thinking of myself more than I was of this person, because I just kept beating myself up that I couldn't do more, that I couldn't help her in the moment. And I left eventually, when the doctors came, I left, and I didn't feel great about that situation. And then a few hours later, a colleague of mine who'd also met with a woman came to me and said, oh, just so you know, I just met with this lady you met with earlier, and she expressed great appreciation for the chaplain that had been with her. She said this was really helpful for her that the chaplain was there. And I just thought, it's beyond me. It's beyond anything that I did or, that I could have offered. There was something else going on there. And then the darkly funny end to that story is that the next day, another one of my colleagues gave me a call and said, could you call this lady? And it was the same lady. She said her husband just died yesterday, and she said she wasn't visited by anyone from spiritual care. So that's how it goes sometimes. I was confusing, I think, and I often confuse this desire, this urge to be helpful, or to be knowledgeable, to have some kind of expertise. And I confuse that with maybe just bringing my whole heart into the situation and allowing whatever needs to unfold, and trusting that. And being kind with that. I have another story. When my husband and I were getting married, there was a little boy who was the son of a friend of mine, and he was very small. He must have been, I don't know, maybe 3 years old at the time. He was very little. So we thought the best job that we could ask him to do would be to throw, I think we had little flowers or something, or rice or whatever it was, and to throw that in the air as we went past. And he was like, okay, he was very excited to do this job. Sure. So when the moment came, I remember so clearly, he was standing right next to me, and he pulled this handful of flowers or rice out of the little box, and then he was doing this. He couldn't figure out how to open his hand and put his arm in the air at the same time. It was just impossible, and he just kept saying, I can't do it. I can't do it. And I think his mum was saying to him, come on, bro, look, now's the moment, do it. And he was just like, I can't do it.